Hello and welcome to the channel Echoes Shadows. Today you will hear about 5 real scary stories experienced by employees and customers of Burger King across the United States. Get ready for spine-chilling moments. Leave a comment if you know these places and if you've had any experiences like this. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming stories. Thank you very much. Story 1. The Last Order.
I've always been a skeptic, the kind of person who doesn't believe in the supernatural. I live in a small town called Dover, Delaware, and I work the night shift at a Burger King on the main highway. I share an apartment with my mom, and I've always liked the night shift. It's quieter, fewer people, and it gives me time to organize things. But one night, something happened that still haunts me to this day. It was just before midnight, and the place was nearly empty. We were getting ready to close. I was working the register, and my co-worker Mike was in the back, cleaning up the grill. Suddenly, I heard the front door creak, like someone had come in. That was strange, because I knew we'd locked everything up. When I looked over, I saw a man standing just inside the door. He was wearing a dark suit, but it looked old and a little dirty. His face was serious, but not in a normal way. It felt off, like he was there for a specific reason. He didn't look like a typical customer. The restaurant was supposed to be closed, and there he was, standing in the middle of the room like he belonged. I tried to keep my cool and asked him if he needed anything. He didn't say a word, just walked slowly to the counter. That's when I felt it, a deep, unsettling feeling in my gut. Something was wrong with this guy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin, placing it on the counter. It was old, rusty, and heavy. Not physically heavy, but there was a strange weight to it, like it didn't belong in this time or even this world. I asked him again what he wanted, but he just kept staring at me, silent. That's when I heard a loud crash from the back, like something had fallen in the kitchen. My heart started racing. I turned quickly to see what it was, but when I looked back at the man, he was gone. Just like that, he had vanished. The door was still locked and the restaurant was empty. I called out for Mike, but there was no response. I rushed into the kitchen and found him standing there, facing the sink, completely still. I called his name, but he didn't react. I touched his shoulder, and when he finally turned around, his face was pale, his eyes wide and empty, like he wasn't really there. "Mike, are you okay?" I asked, but he just stood there, frozen. Suddenly, we both heard footsteps in the dining area, like someone was walking through the restaurant. My stomach dropped. I ran out to check, but again, there was no one there. Except now, on the floor, was the coin the man had left. I hadn't touched it, and the man had disappeared, but somehow it was lying there, almost glowing under the lights. I turned back toward the kitchen to tell Mike, but he was gone. The air felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't explain. Then I heard it, whispers, low, quiet voices like they were all around me, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was like they were just out of reach, but they were getting louder. I knew I had to get out of there. I grabbed my bag and ran to the restroom to collect my things. As I looked in the mirror, my heart nearly stopped. Standing behind me in the reflection was the man in the suit. He wasn't in the room, only in the mirror, staring at me. And then, he smiled. I bolted out of the bathroom, my pulse racing. I found Mike sitting at one of the tables, his head down. I ran over to him, and when he looked up, his face was blank. But his voice wasn't his own. "He's coming back," he said in a deep, unfamiliar tone. That was it. I grabbed my keys, locked the place up, and left without looking back. I couldn't breathe properly until I was out of there. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that coin, about Mike's voice, and especially about the man in the mirror. The next day, I called my manager and told him I wouldn't be working nights anymore. Even now, weeks later, every time I look in the mirror, I remember that smile.
Story 2. The Little Girl at Midnight.
Working the night shift has always been pretty chill for me. The Burger King I work at is in a quiet part of town, so it's almost dead after 10. It was a regular Saturday, and I was used to being alone for hours. The manager had left, and my coworker, Mark, was in the back, finishing up in the kitchen. I was at the register, checking the system before closing, when things started getting weird. It was almost midnight. The place was silent, just the hum of the machines that were already turned off, when suddenly the fryer made a loud noise. I looked over, and the light on the panel was on. The fryer had turned on by itself. I found it strange, but I figured maybe it was just a timer malfunction. I shut it off and went back to the counter, trying to shake off the weird feeling it gave me. No sooner had I sat down when I heard the TV in the dining area. The restaurant's TV, which had been off for hours, had switched on and was flicking through channels on its own, like someone was messing with the remote. I got up and walked over, but as soon as I got close, the screen went black again. By this point, I couldn't ignore the growing unease. It felt like someone else was in there with us, even though I knew it was just me and Mark. "Hey Mark, did you mess with the TV?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. I went to the kitchen, and when I got there, Mark was standing with his back to me, staring at the sink. "Mark?" I called again, but he didn't move. I tapped his shoulder and he turned around, looking startled. "Man, did you hear that?" I asked. But before I could explain what was happening, a loud crash interrupted us. The sound of trays hitting the floor echoed from the dining area. We rushed out, and when we got there, trays were scattered everywhere. I was sure no one else was in the restaurant. I went to check the storage area and even looked at the security cameras, but there was nothing. No movement, just us. The atmosphere started to feel heavy. I knew something wasn't right, but Mark was trying to act like it was all just technical issues. I went back to the counter, trying to ignore the creeping sense of dread. That's when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A small shadow, quick, moving through the rows of tables. I walked over, heart racing. I looked down the row, and that's when I saw her. At the far end of the dining area, near the last booth, stood a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6 or 7, wearing a white dress. What really got to me was that she was barefoot, just standing there, perfectly still, staring at me. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, not believing what I was seeing. The girl didn't answer. She just stood there, eyes locked on mine, like she was waiting for something. I took a step toward her, and just like that, she vanished. 1 second she was there, and the next, gone. I stood frozen, trying to process what I'd just seen. I rushed back to the kitchen, my hands shaking, and told Mark what had happened. He stared at me, trying to take it in, but before he could say anything, all the lights in the restaurant started flickering, and the sound of chairs dragging across the floor echoed through the room. That was the last straw. We ran out of the restaurant without a second thought. I fumbled with the keys as I locked up, my hands trembling, and we got out of there, not looking back. On the way out, still catching our breath, Mark turned to me and said, in a low voice, "Did you ever hear about that accident outside the store a few years ago?" I didn't respond, but something told me that the girl I saw, that barefoot child, had something to do with it. Since that night, I've never stayed in the restaurant past midnight. No matter how much I try to forget, her image is burned into my mind, like she's waiting to appear again.
Story 3. The reflection that wasn't mine.
You know, I've always been a pretty regular guy. I work as an Uber driver in Austin, Texas, and most days my routine is the same. I pick people up, drop them off, and that's it. But one day I'll never forget. It was early March, and it was crazy hot outside. All I wanted was to take a break and grab something to eat. I stopped by a Burger King near Barton Creek Square, 'cause, I don't know, it's quick, easy, and I like the food there, you know? Anyway, I went in, ordered my Whopper, medium fries, and a Coke to cool off. The place was empty, which honestly was perfect. I just needed some peace, away from the traffic, away from annoying passengers who do nothing but complain. I got my tray and sat near the window, the one where you can see the parking lot. I was eating, minding my own business, when out of nowhere, I felt like I had to use the bathroom. It was weird because I had barely started my meal, but whatever, I got up and went. The bathroom was all the way in the back, near the kids' play area, but since the place was dead quiet, I didn't see anyone. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed something was off. The light was flickering. One of those fluorescent lights, you know? I figured it was just some maintenance issue, but there was already this heavy feeling in the air. The place smelled weird too, like it hadn't been cleaned in a while, which made no sense for a busy fast food joint. I locked the stall door, did my business, and that's when I heard it. A sound. It was like soft crying, muffled, like someone was trying not to be heard, but it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the bathroom. The thing is, it didn't sound like a kid's cry. It was deeper, more desperate. I froze. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but I couldn't just ignore it either. I stood there, trying to listen closer, and suddenly the crying just stopped. I hurried out of the stall, barely washed my hands. I just wanted to get out of there. But when I looked in the mirror, it wasn't me staring back. I swear to God, I saw my reflection, but it was facing the wrong way. Like I was looking at the mirror, but the reflection had its back turned to me, almost as if it had a mind of its own. Man, that freaked me out. And then, slowly, it started turning around. And I swear I saw it smirk at me, like some kind of twisted smile that definitely wasn't mine. I bolted out of the bathroom. As I passed through the door, I felt this cold breeze down my neck, like someone was breathing right behind me. I rushed back to my table, trying to catch my breath. I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe I was tired or something. But then I looked at my table, and my tray was on the other side of the restaurant. My fries. They looked like someone had taken a bite out of them, but there was no one there. I was the only customer. I walked up to the tray slowly, not sure what I'd find. As I reached for my Coke, the cup just tipped over on its own. Just like that. The sound of the ice hitting the floor was the only thing I heard, and right after, I felt that same chill, like someone was standing right next to me. Man, I can't describe the fear I felt at that moment. You know when you just know you're not alone but you can't see anyone? That was exactly it. The feeling of being watched by something I couldn't explain. I decided right then and there that I needed to get out. I didn't even finish my meal. I grabbed my stuff and headed for the door. When I got to the parking lot, that's when I realized I wasn't alone. There was a shadow following me. Not a person, not my own reflection. It was something else, something I couldn't put into words. The faster I walked, the closer it got. I made it to my car, slammed the door shut, and drove off without even looking back. That entire night, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened, trying to figure out if it was just my mind playing tricks on me or if there was something real there. To this day, every time I drive by that Burger King, I get this uneasy feeling, like a shiver down my spine. I haven't gone back since, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. Whatever happened in that bathroom, something wasn't right. And I'm not the type to believe in paranormal stuff, but after that day, I don't know, man. Some things just aren't meant to be understood.
Story 4. Voices in the Night.
Working as a security guard never really bothered me. I'm the type of guy who enjoys the quiet, the stillness, so the night shifts were always my favorite part. Most nights, nothing ever happened, just the usual weird people passing by or a car parked wrong. But one night, at the Burger King I was guarding, everything changed. That night, I'll never forget. It was a Wednesday, early September, and the restaurant had just closed. It was around 2 a.m., everything calm as usual. I was doing my rounds in the parking lot when I started hearing some strange noises. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling the tree branches near the lot. But then, I realized the sound wasn't coming from the trees. It was heavier, like something being dragged across the ground. I walked closer to the cars to see if maybe an animal had gotten in or something had fallen, but there was nothing. The silence returned, and I kept doing my rounds, trying to shake it off. But the further I walked, the more I started to feel like I wasn't alone. And I'm not talking about people. I knew the place was closed, and I was the only one there. Suddenly I heard a whisper, low, almost inaudible, like someone was calling my name. Mike ... I froze. I turned around quickly, flashlight in hand, but no one was there. I scanned the lot with the beam of light, only seeing the parked cars and the flickering streetlight in the distance. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. Maybe I was tired, but the way my name was whispered, it was like someone was right next to me. That's when things got worse. As I started walking again, the tree branches began to shake violently, like a strong wind had blown through. But there was no wind. The leaves were still, only the branches were moving. And then I saw it. One of the branches, it snapped off the tree and flew into the middle of the parking lot with a force I couldn't understand, like someone had thrown it, but no one was there. My heart was racing, but I kept moving. I had to finish my patrol. It was my job after all. But with every step I took, the sound of something dragging across the ground grew louder. It was coming from behind the cars, in the far corner of the lot. When I reached that area, I saw what looked like a shadow, a figure, but it wasn't right. It wasn't solid. It was floating, distorted, moving between the cars. I grabbed my radio to call for backup, but all I got was static, a loud, piercing noise. I couldn't get through. I tried to stay calm. I turned off my flashlight, not wanting to draw attention, and waited. The shadow was moving slowly, almost as if it was looking for something, or someone. My whole body was shaking, but I had to see what it was. Then the shadow stopped. That's when the voices started. Voices from all directions, like there were several people surrounding me, whispering, murmuring things I couldn't understand. The voices got louder, and I swear they were getting closer. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to keep it together, but when I opened them, the shadow was gone. I stepped back slowly when I heard it. A laugh, a low, eerie laugh, almost like a child's. And right after, I felt a strong gust of wind on my neck. But it wasn't the type of wind you feel from a breeze. It was cold, icy, like it was coming from inside me. And then, the branches started flying again, this time with more force, some of them almost hitting me. That was it. I ran. I ran straight to the door of the restaurant, locked it behind me, and tried to calm myself down. My breathing was heavy, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I called my manager, made up some excuse to leave early that night. When he arrived, I didn't say a word, just left without looking back. That night, something wasn't right in that parking lot. And to this day, whenever I pass by there, I feel like something's watching me. I've never told anyone at work, but I know what I saw. And no matter how hard I try to forget, that shadow, those voices, they never leave my mind. Since then, I'm always on guard. Whatever was there that night, it might still be out there.
Story 5. The One Who Watches You.
Working the drive-thru was usually pretty boring, especially during the late-night shifts. But one night, something happened that I'll never forget. It was a Friday, around 2:30 in the morning, and things were slow. I was alone in the drive-thru booth, listening to some music through my headset, just waiting for a car to show up. Most of the staff had already gone home. Only me and the manager were left. Everything was calm until my headset started acting up. Static, out of nowhere. I figured it was just interference, so I adjusted the headset, trying to fix it. That's when I heard it. A voice, low, almost like a whisper, but clear enough to send chills down my spine. "You shouldn't be here." I froze, looked around, but the restaurant was empty. The voice definitely came through the headset. I turned the mic on to respond, but all I got was more static, followed by another phrase, louder this time. "It's coming." My heart started racing. I tried convincing myself it was some sort of radio interference, but something felt seriously wrong. The voice was cold, almost inhuman, and it felt like it was coming from all directions at once. I stepped out of the booth and looked through the drive-thru window to see if a car had pulled up. Nothing. The parking lot was completely empty, lit only by the streetlights. I went back inside, trying to shake off the unease. When I sat down again, the headset went quiet. I thought maybe it was over, but then I heard it again. "It's here." The voice was so loud this time that I nearly fell out of my chair. I quickly glanced at the security monitor, hoping to catch something, but there was nothing unusual. Yet something told me I had to go outside and check. I grabbed my jacket and stepped into the cold night. The wind was sharp, and the parking lot was deserted. I walked over to the drive-thru lane, scanning the area. Then I stopped dead in my tracks. At the far end of the parking lot, near a large tree, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A figure. huge. It wasn't human. This thing stood tall, far taller than any person I'd ever seen, and it was surrounded by some kind of mist. I couldn't make out its face clearly, but what I could see was horrifying. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes, they were hollow, like two deep, dark holes. My whole body went cold. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Then I heard it again. The same voice from the headset, but this time without static, as clear as if it were right next to me. It sees you. The figure began to move slowly and silently toward me. There were no footsteps, no sounds at all, just this overwhelming silence. I could barely breathe. Finally, my legs responded, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could back to the restaurant, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grab the phone to call the manager, who was inside taking a nap. He came to the front, saw the look on my face, but I couldn't explain what had just happened. I just asked to leave early. He agreed, and I left without looking back. I never worked the night shift again after that. To this day, whenever I drive by that Burger King, I can't help but glance at the parking lot, afraid I might see that figure again. I've never told anyone this story before, but even now I can still hear that voice sometimes, a cold whisper saying, "It sees you."